Hello, good afternoon, everybody. This is Kazeem and it's time for the Tech Talk show this afternoon. Today on the show, we're going to be we're going to be talking about changes on Microsoft Azure. So that's what we're going to be looking at today. And we've got Adnan Hendricks is back on the show with us today. Hi, Adnan.
Hi, Kazeem. Great to be here.
All right, Adnan. So I'm just going to let you quickly introduce yourself, and then we can go on a short break before we kick things off today on the show.
Yes, I'm Adnan Hendricks, at Micro Specialist on social media. I'm an IT or cloud architect, and I do a lot of consulting, workshops, training, and I like to talk tech on cloud.
Thank you very much, Adnan, for that quick introduction. So we're going to go on a short break right now, and we'll be back in just a little bit. All right, so you're welcome back on the Tech Talk show this Wednesday afternoon. So Adnan, you're back on the show. So today we're going to be talking about what has changed on Azure, Adnan. So last week was Microsoft Ignite, right?
Yes, a lot of new things were announced during Microsoft's Premier Conference that they do yearly. Unfortunately, due to our current circumstances with the COVID situation, it's been moved to an online conference. So a lot of us that usually take part, and
Okay. I don't want us to assume now, Adnan, for the benefit of those listening right now, what is Microsoft Ignite and what happens at Ignite?
Well, Microsoft Ignite is Microsoft's premier conference where they bring all their latest new technologies or features that they improved on in their products, and also new features that they've thought up. And they make big announcements, and that pretty much carries forward the trends for the rest of the year, the coming time. And as you know, cloud is huge. So a lot of new announcements about the Azure platform and all the products in general. You know, the world that we live in has moved into remote working. So a lot of their focus were on remote workers, and our companies can be more productive with things like Teams.
Today on the show, though, we're going to be focusing on Azure, right? So what has changed on Azure? Yes, exactly. So let's start the show now with some of those changes, Adnan. So what do we have as those new rollouts to Azure now?
Well, firstly, Azure's growing. So on the data center side, there's a lot of new regions that's been made available. So extra regions being made available, and in countries like Israel, Italy, Mexico, Qatar, Poland, and New Zealand. So they in the works and should be available in the coming year. On the other side, with data centers, their availability zones are being deployed to more Azure regions. So that's a feature where it still provides some kind of disaster recovery for infrastructure running in a specific data center. So a region is split up into different zones. So a client or customer can make use of that high availability and disaster recovery capabilities by using availability zones. So that's just being pushed into more regions, and clients can get the benefit of using those things.
Okay, and just to be sure, we have a vast range of people listening on the show right now. So some of them might not know what availability zone is about. So for the benefit of those people who don't know what availability zone means, how would you, in a layman's term now, how do you want to break this down for them? What is an availability zone, Adnan?
An availability zone you could see, or a zone in Azure, you could see as an independent data center. So it's basically a building or a bunch of buildings that make up one zone, and it has its own independent power source, um, air conditioning, any requirements that's needed for the sufficient running of that zone. It will be independent from the rest of the zone. So let's say something happens with the electrical supply for that zone. So the other zones within that region will still be operational. So let's say a disaster happens, something explodes within a data center in a zone. And me as a client, I've got resources running there. If I use the availability zones, it has the ability to run independently. So I can have a failover to another zone in the same region, which is still closer to my location than using intra-region failover, for example. So zones just make it better for my services that run in that zone or region to be high available and have a continuous uptime in the possibility of a zone outage.
How about, I also see that one of the recent updates is the Azure Mover, that's the Azure Resource Mover. So what's the deal with the Azure Resource Mover?
Well, Azure Resource Mover just makes it easier to move resources from one region to another region. So in the past, not all workloads were available to be moved, and sometimes it was a bit more complicated. So the Azure Resource Mover just simplifies that by moving multiple resources between different regions. Because some of the things in the past were, somebody just go and create something and they'd forget to select the correct region. And then, quite often they just start, new. And sometimes that fault is only discovered later down the line after they've already invested so much changes. And to start over at that point is not feasible. So you could move certain resources between regions, but now it's just a lot easier to do that with the resource mover. But but there's still a lot more new things that's been made available on Azure.
On that hybrid now, hybrid and compute, we know about the Azure Arc, right? So can you help us, Adnan, what is Azure Arc before we get into what has changed, with the Azure Arc?
So Azure Arc is, you could say it's a management capability to provide governance across all your infrastructure. So it's a way I can manage my, let's say, virtual machines, whether they're running in the cloud on my local data center, or maybe in another cloud vendor.
So now what has changed with the Azure Arc? What's the new introduction now that was announced with the Azure Arc?
So the capability allows you to, a lot of clients, they hesitant to move towards the cloud, or quite often because you have all these different locations. For example, if you go to AWS cloud, you have to manage your virtual machines or your infrastructure in a certain way. If you go to Azure, you have the possibilities to manage it there. And then depending on what the client is running, if it's on Hyper-V virtualization or VMware or physical servers, you know. So some clients are hesitant to go into those situations because then the management, there's new tooling to learn. So Azure Arc extends Azure management. So if you were to have infrastructure running like resources like Windows machines, Linux machines, SQL, and even Kubernetes clusters, so you could run those things across not only the public cloud, um, on your own on-premises data centers, or even within what we call multi-clouds and edge, where it doesn't really matter which cloud provider you're using. Azure Arc can enable the deployment of Azure data services, SQL managed instances, Postgres, and even orchestrate and manage Kubernetes clusters. So it does quite a lot, and it really is becoming that single uh, pane of glass for management and governance.
So it means that with Azure Arc now, once we have, I guess there's an agent involved here, right? That we need to have on those other machines so that we're able to manage them as a resource up on Azure. Is that correct?
Yes, that's
Okay, so you want to walk us through other changes, and are there other changes you want to share?
sure. One nice one is that we going to space, you know. So Microsoft is coming with a really nice new service called Azure Orbital for companies that require satellite communications, or for some reason they need to feed off the kind of data that satellites can provide. So you have all these different industry segments um, that already make use of satellite information and communication, you know, like in the oil and mining and defense, and a lot of these remote locations. So Azure Orbital allows a company to make use of a ground station as a service. So basically, Microsoft is investing heavily into those kind of specific hardware, and that ties into directly into Azure data centers and allows, you know, well, us in future to create great applications that use this kind of information. And these things could be for machine learning, you know, learning more about the Earth, learning more about space, and just getting all that information into the cloud, and then creating rest of Azure services on that. So that's really interesting to see
It is.
what people are going to be doing with that.
Quickly, Adnan, I think we'll need to go on a short break now. And when we're back on break, from the short break, we'll look at some of the other changes before we wrap up on the show today.
Sure.
All right, so you're welcome back. It's still the Tech Talk show this Wednesday afternoon, and I've still got Adnan on the show with us this afternoon, walking us through some of the new announcements now to the Azure platform last week at Ignite. Adnan, I know you still have more of this recent update for us. Do you want to help us with a few more for
Sure.
run up time? Yes.
So one of the improvements that they're bringing on the infrastructure side is things like Azure Auto Manage, and it's a service that you can have Azure manage all your virtual machines running in the cloud. So think about things like updates, backups, desired state configuration. So any changes or things that is required for your virtual machine that you as a administrator used to take care of. With Azure Auto Manage, you have the ability to, with the service, to manage all those things for you. So that just frees up your time to do other fun stuff, you know? So that's really good. And then, you know, there's a whole list of things. For example, the new backup center for a unified experience of your backup management. So backups at scale and new capabilities that expand resources and applications. So there's a lot of improvements with those. And where whereas in the past, you know, you used to require a backup vault in every region, and each region's backup was pretty much only for those resources within that region. They now allow or extend cross-region restores. So a lot of clients are going to be happy that you can now restore, which will improve those, you know, problems where there's outages within another region of a specific resource, and you could just restore a service or infrastructure that's been backed up into another region. So a lot of people are going to be happy with that.
How about in the area of compute itself? You know, VMs now. I also saw that we now have some new VM types being introduced now. Your thoughts on those? And I also learned storage as well. You know, we have a new type of storage too that is being introduced. You know, you want to share your thoughts on those as well?
Well, you know, it's always increasing. You know, as soon as the hardware vendors, the guys like Intel, when they have new processes and new things up and running and available for us, you know, Microsoft invests heavily in keeping their data centers or their capabilities and offerings, you know, like up to date and fresh. So there's new virtual machine sizes available that make use of the new Intel Cascade Lake processors for general purpose and memory intensive workloads. And then, you know, these things give you 20% increase of CPU performance compared to, you know, what we were running. So there's a lot of performance increases with these. And the same thing with the dedicated hosts that you as a customer can, you know, sort of lease from them and use on a data center. So a lot of improvements on that side for the deployment and even the management of those dedicated hosts. So they allow you to, you know, with cloud, generally the vendor takes care of the updates and the management of the physical hardware. Now with dedicated host, you as customer, you can schedule the maintenance operations on them as well as isolated VMs, and basically have the control of when operating system images updates are rolled out and those kind of things. So that gives you greater flexibility and more control. On the disk side, there's always, just like the hardware, as soon as there's new hardware available, Azure Ultra disks with bigger support. So more data sizes, bigger disks available on the disk storage side. And Ultra disks is really high speed, high performance disks that provide low latency, lots of IOPS, so really good performance and really fast for those transactional type of applications and databases. So making use of those is just going to speed up a lot of people's applications. So really good for those big data and analytics apps and transactional data applications.
Okay, from this many available Azure services, Adnan, can you think of any of the services that one can leverage in a university environment? For example, this show now is hearing live at Lasso Radio. So, which service, which of the Azure service comes to mind now that people can leverage in a university environment?
A
Be
university
it for
environment,
students
so
and also for administering things, for delivering lectures, which comes to mind?
well, in the back end, based on some of my client profiles that are in education, universities generally make use of a lot of resources. So you find that they quite often require extra virtual machines or the capabilities to use many virtual machines and things for a number of different reasons. Now, with Azure, you have new Azure Spot virtual machine capabilities and features that provides you, like certain workloads for like a cheaper cost. So it enables better cost of running workloads using Spot VMs instead of using normal priced things. So you're getting a good performance, and it has optimized cost, security, reliability, and performance. And generally, those things are a lot cheaper to run than the average virtual machines. So those things, I think, is a great benefit for people that need specific performance, but they don't want to pay a lot upfront for running heavy duty virtual machine sizes. So those are just some of the things. And then there's a lot of improvements on Windows virtual desktops as well, where let's say instead of having a number of different computers available for the students with virtual desktop, a student can get access to the same desktop that runs virtually, for example. So instead of getting a university issued device,
Okay,
and that
okay,
also brings cost down,
okay, okay.
because it's all about performance and cost at the moment, especially when we have, universities have a lot of students,
Yes.
so every year there's like thousands of students and increases in there. So that and security.
What would be your recommended resource or go-to place for students listening right now that are looking to build a career in cloud computing and wanting to leverage more of these Azure services? We have, for instance, a developer community in school here. So what would your advice be for those students listening in right now?
Well, the first advice I'd give is to you know follow our webinars. We do monthly webinars. We will also talk about career and opportunities within IT and cloud. And specifically, if you're looking at the Microsoft landscape, a lot of information is found on docs.microsoft.com for those that are interested in specific things like Azure or Microsoft 365 or Office 365 or just some development things. There's Microsoft Learn as well. So on the Microsoft website, they can go to Microsoft Learn, the Learn website, and follow some of the trainings that's up there. So that would be the first place to look. And once they're excited about something specific, then they can go deeper into, the docs, the documentation with the tutorials and the how-tos. So there's really a lot of guidance in, getting started, getting up and running, and also a lot of the software is, there's a way they can sign up for trials. And depending on the university, for universities and for students in general, they generally get like free Azure credit that they can look up into and sign up for to get started.
Yes, thank you very much for that advice, Adnan. We're fast spent on time now, so it's also interesting for you to know that yes, today we are not, able to show any demo. We won't be showing any demo today, but every month we run a webinar, at the LASU CBT Center, and Adnan comes once at least every month to show us some nice, cool demo about Azure, around different Azure topics. So please feel free to join one of those webinars. So we have Azure webinars, that takes place every now and then. There's the Power Platform webinar that also happens every now and then. So in one of those webinars, some of those things that we've talked about today, would be able to see some demos around those. So this is how much we're going to be able to take on the show, the Tech Talk Show Wednesday with me today. So thank you, Adnan, for your time. And any parting word from you, Adnan?
Just keep learning. And thank you for having me. Follow us on social media at MicroSpecialist on Twitter, and try and join our webinars. It's always something new to learn.
Very, very true. And you can also look up the social handles online as well. So it's the LASU CBT 18 across the social media platforms. So you can view a number of the videos we already have on YouTube. So thank you very much once again, everyone, for listening in. And thank you, Adnan, for your time. And it's a bye-bye from myself and Adnan. Yes.
And it's bye.